This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Thanks so much for helping out our channel.
Hello guys, this is Svetlana from Cosplay, and today I wanted to show you how to build this really cool Star Wars inspired robot arm. So if you want to get into crafting and cosplay, I think this is just the perfect project to get started. And especially like this is just a simple EVA foam and you don't need a lot of tools to make it, and especially you can find the patterns for this baby here on my website cosplay.com. So you just download them and then print them and like trace them to the material you want to work with and then start crafting. That's awesome, right? And yeah, if you need more help to get started to craft with EVA foam, you can also check out my foam armor book also on cosplay.com. There you can learn how to make full costumes, which are even better. And now let's start crafting.
So as mentioned, I used Anakin's arm from Star Wars as a rough reference. First, I needed a glove though. You can obviously just buy one, but I prefer to make them myself. After I traced the rough shape of my arm onto paper, I added a good amount of sew allowance around the fingers. Next, I cut out the shape. My fabric of choice was this flexible faux leather, which I got from cosplayfabrics.com. I traced one side with sewing chalk and placed this one onto a further piece of fabric. Then I connected both layers with plenty of pins along the lines. So far, so good. I just had to grab a so-called microtex needle and used a stretch stitch to sew along the markings. Now I carefully cut off the excess material and the glove looked already pretty sweet. Just had to turn it inside out and make sure I found the ends of the fingertips. Yes, this is a super lazy way to make gloves, but as you can see, it still does the job. Now to the actual robot arm. First, I used duct tape, placed it onto my hand and roughly tried to trace the shape of my backhand. I also added some simple details, got rid of the tape and then cut everything out. For the fingers, I worked a little bit more freestyle. Doing them is actually quite annoying since you need to make separate patterns for almost every finger. However, I used just a basic shape and adjusted it slightly for each finger. As you can see, I used thicker paper since it's actually far easier to work with. For the fingers, I used 2mm high density EVA foam. And you can surely guess the next step, right? I traced every part onto the material. The fingers were quite the puzzle, so it helped to place little markings here. Otherwise, I would just mess up which part belongs to which finger. Can you already see the robot arm? Well, not really, right? Now I cut in little gaps with my X-Acto knife on both sides. Just had to be a little bit careful here. Next, I got these nice little gaps, see? Afterwards, I filled them up with contact cement and folded the material. Following that, I heated up the foam and shaped it directly onto my fingers. Same goes for the back. See, works like a charm. By the way, you can do this even after you applied primer and paint. Now for the arm, I covered myself first in plastic wrap and stuck on a lot of duct tape. This is my go-to technique for all kinds of patterns, by the way. Super easy. Next, I drew on the shapes I needed. You can totally add any designs you want here. I simply tried to stay kind of similar to my Star Wars reference. As you can see, my sketch was also super rough, but it would do the job. Then I carefully cut myself free, got rid of the excess material, traced the pattern onto paper and drew everything nice and pretty. Here were all the parts. This time I used 5mm EVA foam and traced again all shapes onto the material. You know the drill already. Afterwards I grabbed my Dremel to smooth out the edges. This helped to fix my super ugly cuts. Oh, and then I grabbed a random arm from one of my mannequins. I could totally heat shape the foam on my arm as well, but this way I just can show it better to you. Now some of my favorite cosplay shops, link in the video description by the way, offer also these awesome dowels in different sizes. They are great for all kinds of details. I just added a bunch of stuff here and there, made this thing out of a further dowel, placed more foam leftovers here, and connected both parts. As you can see, working with foam is really simple. You don't need a lot of tools to create basic shapes and details super easy. Don't forget to check out my foam armor making book for more tips and tricks. So, I was finally done with the build. How do you like it so far? Wasn't complicated, right? Before the painting fun could begin though, I had to seal everything first. I used here a flexible spray-on rubber similar to Plastidip. For painting, Benny used some Silver Vallejo airbrush colors, but regular acrylics would totally work as well. Afterwards, he only added some darker shadows and sealed the paint job with a satin spray varnish. Well, and that's pretty much it. So now the very last step, attaching everything to the glove. But before we do that, a word from our sponsor. I mostly use foam to create my costumes and props, but there are plenty of other crafting materials. Skillshare offers some amazing courses here. I really enjoyed woodworking for beginners with Anne Briggs and Josh Nava. Their hands-on class takes you through the entire process of creating your very first wooden craft. This course will teach you how to source wood outdoors on regular walks, basic wood cuts, and how to create designs in 3D. Other than that, Skillshare is a huge online learning community full of inspiring classes for creative people like you and me. It offers countless hours of educational content on illustration, design photography, video editing, productivity, lifestyle, and so much more. The first 1,000 people to use the code in my video description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership, so hurry up and check out all these helpful classes. Thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Now let's continue. Attaching everything to the glove. For this part I had to grab a trusty glue. Gütermann HT2 is a super reliable fabric glue, which I totally love. I applied a good amount to the inside of the foam and simply attached it onto the fabric. This way I worked myself from finger to finger and slowly covered my whole hand with foam. I was super happy so far. Next, it was time for the back of the hand, and finally the thumb. As you can see, I kept the inside free of foam, so it's still easy to grab anything without damaging the costume piece. For a few additional details, I picked some wires and hot glued them onto the foam. I admit though, I got a little bit lazy here. If you want, you can add far more awesome details like rivets, cables, and even LEDs. Afterwards, I glued all those parts on with my trusty fabric glue. I added here also some wires and placed then everything onto the fabric. Well, and that's pretty much how I attached everything onto the glove. Super easy, right? Even this huge element holds perfectly. And finally, my Star Wars inspired robot arm was done. How do you like it? Since it's all just foam, it's really comfy and flexible. This was a really fast and fun project. Don't forget, you can find the patterns for it on kamicosplay.com.
Surprise! I actually have 2 of these robot arms. So this version is actually version number 1 made out of the thermoplastic material wobbler, which I made like a few years ago. And since I was lazy this time, I used for the foam version less details and less effort. But basically what I wanted to tell you is it doesn't really depend on the material you choose. You can make everything out of everything, and maybe you can also make your robot arm out of cardboard, you know. But yeah, let's have fun crafting and make cool robot arms. I mean, it's not my biggest project, but I think it's great to get started if you want to work with EVA foam, if you want to try out the wonderful world of cosplay. Yeah, if you have any questions regarding to that, please leave me a comment down below. And if you don't have a comment or a question, very important, write down Corgi and join the Corgi squad to support us with the YouTube algorithm. And yeah, if you're curious about the tools and materials I used, as always, you can find links for everything in the video description down below. And yeah, other than that, thanks so much for watching. Let like, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, consider to support us on Patreon. Thanks a lot to our Patreons at this point, and see you very soon. Bye bye. And finally, I want to say a huge thank you to all our super sponsors on Patreon. And these are Emma, Jessica Burden, Lisa, Luisa Paris, Lorica Cosplay, and Matrices. Thanks so much for your support, and thanks a lot to all our other Patreons.